What if you built a dream business only to discover a dark secret hidden in plain sight? What if a casual visit to your own restaurant revealed a truth so heartbreaking it could unravel everything you've worked for? Today, we're uncovering the incredible story of Michael Luciano, a celebrated restaurateur whose undercover mission led him to a shocking confrontation with his past. Stick around because this tale has twists that will keep you glued to the screen. Michael Luciano was a name synonymous with culinary excellence. Born into a working-class family in Brooklyn, Michael grew up in the shadow of his grandfather's tiny diner, where the smell of simmering tomato sauce and the clatter of pots were his earliest memories. His family barely scraped by, but they taught him the value of hard work and the magic of a good meal shared with loved ones. Armed with grit and a passion for food, Michael turned those lessons into Luciano's Bistro, a high-end restaurant that became the crown jewel of his career, with its cozy ambiance and dishes that told stories of tradition and innovation. Luciano's Bistro wasn't just a place to eat. It was an experience from a single location. Michael expanded to 3 bustling bistros across the city, earning rave reviews and a loyal following. He was featured in food magazines, invited to culinary panels, and hailed as a visionary in the industry. But beneath the polished surface of success, Michael felt a growing unease. Sitting in his upscale office, surrounded by framed accolades and glowing online reviews, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Were his restaurants still the warm, welcoming havens he'd envisioned? Were they still about the people, or had they become just another profit machine? The reports from his managers painted a perfect picture. Steady sales, happy staff, satisfied customers. Yet Michael knew that numbers and polished summaries didn't always tell the whole story. He'd been too far removed from the day-to-day grind, too caught up in boardroom meetings and expansion plans. One rainy Tuesday evening, after another sleepless night, Michael made a bold decision. He would see the truth for himself. No entourage, no fancy suit, just him, disguised as an ordinary customer, walking into the original Luciano's Bistro, dressed in a worn hoodie, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Michael stepped through the familiar doors, ready to observe his creation through the eyes of a stranger. Little did he know, this simple undercover visit would uncover a secret from his past that would change everything. As Michael settled into a booth near the back of Luciano's Bistro, the familiar hum of the restaurant enveloped him. Servers bustled between tables, balancing trays of steaming fettuccine and glasses of ruby-red wine. Couples shared quiet laughs over candlelit dinners, while a family at a nearby table passed around a plate of tiramisu, their children giggling over sticky fingers. Michael felt a flicker of pride. His vision of a place where memories were made still seemed alive, but he wasn't there to bask in nostalgia. He was there to uncover the unfiltered truth. He opened the menu, one he'd crafted himself over the years. But his eyes weren't on the dishes. They darted around the room, taking in every detail: the hurried pace of a young waiter, the forced smile of a hostess juggling reservations, the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. So far, everything seemed fine, if a bit rushed. He ordered a glass of water from a cheerful waitress named Sarah, keeping his tone casual to avoid drawing attention. As she walked away, Michael leaned back, ready to listen to the chatter around him. That's when he heard it, 2 young voices, hushed but urgent, coming from the booth directly behind him. "Do you think he's even here tonight?" The first voice whispered, high-pitched and nervous, like a kid unused to sneaking around. "I don't know." The second voice replied, sharper and more confident, "But Mom said this is his spot. She said he's always here on Tuesdays." Michael's brow furrowed. Who were they talking about? He kept his head down, pretending to study the menu, but his ears were locked on their conversation. "What if we get caught?" the first boy asked, his voice trembling. "We're not supposed to be out this late." "We won't get caught," the second boy snapped. "We just need to see him. Mom said it's his fault we're in this mess." Michael's grip on the menu tightened. His fault. The words stung, though he couldn't quite place why. Were they looking for a local figure, a celebrity chef, or someone else entirely? His mind raced through possibilities, but something in their tone, a raw personal bitterness, made him uneasy. He shifted slightly, trying to catch a glimpse of them without turning around. From the corner of his eye, he saw two boys, no older than 12 or 13, hunched over their table. One wore a hoodie, his curly hair peeking out, while the other had a baseball cap pulled low over his face. They looked out of place, nervous, scanning the room as if expecting trouble. "Mom said he ruined everything," the second boy continued, his voice low but fierce. "She said if it weren't for him, we wouldn't be scraping by. I just want to look him in the eye and ask why." The first boy hesitated. "Do you think he'd even care? What if we tell him and he just laughs?" "I don't care if he laughs." The second boy shot back. "I want him to know what he did to her. To us." Michael's stomach churned. The accusation felt too pointed, too close to home. Could they be talking about him? It didn't make sense. He prided himself on running his business with integrity, on treating his staff fairly. Sure, he'd made tough calls, firing underperformers, pushing hard for perfection, but nothing that would warrant this kind of resentment. Or had he? Memories from the early days of Luciano's Bistro flickered through his mind. Long nights, high stress, and decisions made in the heat of ambition. Had he overlooked someone's pain in his rush to build an empire? He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought, but the boy's words gnawed at him. Just then Sarah returned with his water. "Ready to order?" she asked with a bright smile. Michael barely looked up, his mind elsewhere. I'll take the house special," he mumbled. She nodded and left, but Michael's focus snapped back to the booth behind him. "Mom showed me a picture once," the first boy whispered. "She said we'd recognize him if we saw him. He's got this look, you know, like he owns the place." Michael's heart skipped a beat. Owns the place. The description hit too close. He felt a cold sweat prickling at the back of his neck. Were they really here for him? And if so, who was their mother? What had he done to earn such hatred? He wanted to turn around to confront them right then and there, but something held him back. If they were talking about him revealing his identity, could make things worse. But if he stayed silent, he might never know the truth. As he wrestled with his next move, an older waiter, Marco, walked by a tray balanced on his shoulder. Marco had been with Luciano's Bistro since the beginning, a loyal employee who knew every inch of the place. Michael caught his eye and gave a subtle nod, hoping to signal for a quick chat. Marco approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "Everything okay, sir?" he asked, his tone polite but curious. Michael lowered his voice, careful not to draw attention. "Those two kids in the booth behind me, have you seen them before?" Marco glanced over, then shook his head. "Nah, first time I've noticed them. They look a bit young to be here alone, don't they?" Michael nodded, forcing a casual smile. "Yeah, just wondering. Thanks, Marco." As Marco walked away, Michael's unease deepened. The boys weren't regulars, which meant they were here for a specific reason. Their whispers, their urgency, it all pointed to something personal. He took a sip of water, the glass cool against his trembling fingers, and made a decision. He couldn't just sit there and wonder. He needed answers, even if it meant risking his cover. But how could he approach them without escalating the situation? The weight of their words pressed down on him, and for the first time in years, Michael felt exposed, vulnerable, in the very place he'd built from the ground up. Michael's heart thundered in his chest as he sat in the dimly lit booth at Luciano's Bistro, the weight of the boys' whispered accusations pressing down like a storm cloud. Their words, Mom said, he ruined everything. I just want to look him in the eye and ask why, looped in his mind, each repetition tightening the knot in his stomach. He couldn't ignore the possibility that they were talking about him, but confronting them directly felt like walking into a lion's den. What if they recognized him on sight? What if their anger erupted right there in the middle of his restaurant, shattering the carefully curated atmosphere he'd built over decades? Yet the uncertainty was a heavier burden than the risk. He had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Taking a shaky breath, Michael adjusted his baseball cap to obscure his face, stood up and walked toward the boys' booth with a forced, casual stride, his hands shoved deep into his pockets to hide their trembling. As he approached, the two boys froze, their wide eyes snapping up to meet his. The one in the hoodie straightened his face, twisting into a mask of defiance, while the other, wearing the baseball cap, fidgeted nervously with a napkin, shredding it into tiny pieces. "Hey guys," Michael said, his voice softer than he felt, forcing a small, non-threatening smile. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit on edge. Everything okay here?" The boy in the hoodie narrowed his eyes, his tone sharp and defensive. "We're fine. Why do you care? Who are you anyway?" Michael hesitated, his mind racing for the right words. "I just thought, well, I overheard you mentioning someone you were looking for. If you need help finding them, I might know a few people around here." The boys exchanged a wary glance, suspicion radiating from them like heat from a flame. The one in the cap bit his lip, clearly uneasy, but the boy in the hoodie leaned forward, studying Michael's face with an intensity that made his blood run cold. "Wait a second," the boy said slowly, his voice rising with a mix of shock and fury. "I know that face. You're him, aren't you? You're Michael Luciano." Michael's heart plummeted. There was no escaping it now. He sighed, lowering his voice to avoid drawing attention from nearby tables where diners chatted obliviously over glasses of wine. "Yeah, Michael Luciano. I own this place, but how do you know me, and why are you looking for me?" The boy in the hoodie's green eyes blazed with raw, unfiltered anger. "Because of what you did to our mom." He snapped, his voice trembling with emotion as it cut through the hum of the restaurant. "You destroyed her life, and you don't even care." Michael blinked, stunned by the venom in the boy's words. He raised a hand in a calming gesture, acutely aware of a few curious glances from nearby patrons. "Your mom? I'm sorry, but I don't even know who." "Don't play dumb," the boy interrupted, slamming a fist on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. The noise drew more eyes, and Michael felt a bead of sweat trickle down his neck. "Her name is Angela Carter. She worked here, poured her heart into this place, and you stole from her. You took her recipes, claimed them as your own, and made sure she couldn't work anywhere else. She told us everything, and now we're here to make you face it." The name struck Michael like a lightning bolt. Angela Carter. Memories surged to the surface. Angela, a fiery sous chef in the chaotic early days of Luciano's Bistro, brimming with talent and bold ideas. She'd been a cornerstone of his kitchen, but one day she'd vanished without a word. He hadn't thought of her in over a decade. "Angela," he murmured, the name heavy on his tongue. "She was part of my team, yes, but stole from her, blacklisted her. That's not true. I never—" "It is true," the boy shouted, his voice cracking as tears of frustration welled in his eyes. "Mom said you were jealous, that you couldn't stand someone else shining brighter than you. After she left, no one would hire her. Now she's stuck working a dead-end job at a diner, barely getting by, all because of you. Do you even know what that's done to us, to her?" Michael felt as if the floor had dropped out beneath him. He searched his memory frantically, trying to piece together the fractured past. Had he taken credit for her work without realizing it? In those early, desperate years when he was clawing to make Luciano's Bistro a success, had he been so consumed by ambition that he'd trampled over her contributions and the blacklisting? Could his casual, frustrated remarks to industry peers about her abrupt departure have been twisted into something malicious? "I didn't know," Michael said quietly, his voice breaking under the weight of guilt. "I swear, if I hurt her, it wasn't intentional. I need to hear this from her directly. Please, will you let me talk to your mom?" The boys exchanged another glance, uncertainty flickering in their expressions, but the anger in the hoodie-clad boy, Jacob, as Michael would later learn, didn't waver. "Why should we trust you?" Jacob spat. "You've already taken everything from her. What if you just make things worse?" The boy in the cap, quieter and more hesitant, spoke up for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, maybe we should let him. Mom deserves to face him herself." Jacob glared at his brother, then back at Michael, his jaw tight. Finally, he relented with a curt nod. Fine, but don't think this means we're okay with you. If you really want to know, you can come to our place. But if you try anything at all, you'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. Michael nodded, a mix of dread and determination settling in his chest. I understand. Just give me the chance to understand what happened. Later that evening, under a relentless drizzle that mirrored his mood, Michael arrived at the modest apartment complex the boys had directed him to. The building was a far cry from the polished world of Luciano's Bistro, peeling, paint-flickering porch lights, and a faint smell of mildew in the air. As he knocked on the door, guilt gnawed at him like a persistent ache. If Angela's life had unraveled because of him, he owed her more than an apology. He owed her justice. But what if she refused to even speak to him? What if the damage was irreparable? The door creaked open and Jacob stood there, his expression as guarded as ever, arms crossed defensively. You actually came, he said, a hint of surprise cutting through his hostility. Michael nodded, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. I need to understand what happened. Where's your mom? Jacob hesitated, his eyes searching Michael's face for any sign of deceit. Finally, he stepped aside. She's inside, but don't expect her to be happy to see you. Michael stepped into the small, tidy apartment, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air, a stark contrast to the tension that hung like a fog. Family photos lined the walls showing happier times that felt like a distant memory compared to the present. His eyes landed on the woman sitting on a worn couch, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of a muted TV. Angela Carter. Her once vibrant auburn hair was streaked with gray, and there was a deep weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there years ago, but she was still unmistakably Angela, the determined chef who had once been the heartbeat of his kitchen. Angela, Michael said softly, his voice almost lost in the quiet. She looked up, her expression shifting from shock to cold, simmering resentment. Michael Luciano, she said, her voice icy, each syllable a dagger. I never thought I'd see you darken my doorstep. What do you want? Michael took a cautious step forward, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on him. Angela, I didn't know it was you until tonight. Your boys told me what you believe happened. I need to hear it from you. Did I really hurt you that badly? Angela's eyes narrowed, and she set the remote aside with a deliberate slowness that spoke of barely contained anger. You don't remember, do you? She asked bitterly, her voice rising. Of course not. People like you never do. You build your empires on the backs of people like me, then forget we ever existed. I'm not here to argue, Michael said earnestly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. I honestly don't recall doing anything to destroy your life. Please tell me what happened. I want to understand. Angela crossed her arms, her voice erupting with years of pent-up pain. You took credit for my work, Michael. Those signature dishes that put Luciano's Bistro on the map, most of them were mine. I trusted you, thought you were mentoring me. But you used me, every article, every review. It was always your name, never mine. And when I confronted you, you laughed it off, told me I was overreacting. Then after I left, no one would hire me. I heard through the grapevine that you'd warned people I was unreliable, a troublemaker. I had to leave the industry entirely, and now I'm here barely scraping by while you live in luxury off my ideas. Michael's stomach churned as her words sliced through him. He hadn't consciously sabotaged her, but he couldn't deny the possibility that his ambition had blinded him. Worse, he vaguely remembered a heated argument with her, a moment where he dismissed her concerns in the stress of a busy service. Had his words been more cutting than he'd intended, and those offhand comments to colleagues, had they snowballed into a blacklist without his realizing it? Angela, I didn't realize, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I was so focused on building the restaurant that I might have overlooked your contributions and the blacklisting. I never meant for that to happen. If I said anything that hurt your chances, I'm sorry, I want to make this right. Angela scoffed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but her anger flared hotter. Sorry? You think a simple sorry erases over a decade of struggle? You think it fixes the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering how I'd feed my boys? You don't get to waltz in here and play the hero. Michael, get out. I don't want your pity. Her words hit like a physical blow, and for a moment Michael froze, the weight of her rejection crushing him. Jacob stepped forward, his young face contorted with rage. You heard her leave. We don't need you. But Michael wasn't ready to give up, even as every instinct screamed at him to retreat. Angela, please, he said, his voice raw with desperation. I can't undo the past, but I can give you the recognition you deserve. Now I'd like to offer you a position at Luciano's Bistro head chef, with full creative control and public acknowledgement of your contributions. And beyond that, I want to host an event at the restaurant, a special night to honor you and others who helped build this place. You don't have to forgive me, but please think about it. Let me prove I'm not the man you think I am. Angela's eyes widened, caught off guard by the offer, but her expression quickly hardened again. You think you can just buy my forgiveness with a job and a party? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. You think I'd step foot in that kitchen again, knowing how you treated me? No, Michael, I don't trust you, I can't. Her refusal stung, but Michael pressed on, sensing a crack in her armor. This isn't about buying forgiveness, he said firmly. It's about giving you the platform you should have had from the start. I want you back in the kitchen doing what you love with the credit you deserve. And if you don't want to work with me, I'll step back, let you run the show. Just don't shut the door completely. Take your time to decide, but know that I'm truly sorry. Before Angela could respond, Jacob exploded, his voice shaking with fury. Stop it! You're just making it worse. Mom doesn't need your charity. She needs you to admit what you did, not throw money at the problem. He lunged forward, shoving Michael with surprising force for a boy his age. Michael stumbled back, catching himself against the wall, his breath hitching. The younger brother Ethan gasped, tugging at Jacob's sleeve. Jake, stop! Let's just hear him out. Jacob spun on Ethan, his face flushed. Why are you defending him after everything Mom told us? Ethan shrank back, tears in his eyes. I just want Mom to be happy again. What if he's telling the truth? The room fell into a tense silence, the only sound the distant patter of rain against the window. Angela stared at her sons, then at Michael, emotions warring in her gaze. Anger, pain, and a flicker of doubt. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping slightly. I don't know, Michael, she said, her voice quieter now, almost broken. I don't know if I can trust you again. I've built walls to protect myself, to protect them, but I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. Michael nodded, a small spark of hope igniting and on his chest, despite the bruising encounter. That's all I ask, he said. I'll wait, Angela, however long it takes. As he turned to leave, Jacob's voice stopped him, still sharp, but less venomous. Hey, the boy said, his tone grudging. If you're lying, if you hurt her again, he'll make sure you regret it. Michael met his gaze, seeing the fierce protectiveness in the boy's eyes. I won't, he said simply. Your mom deserves better, and I'm going to prove it. Jacob studied him for a long moment, then gave a barely perceptible nod. Well, see, stepping back into the rain, Michael felt a storm of emotions, guilt for the past, fear of failure, but also a burning resolve. The confrontation had been messier, more painful than he'd imagined, and Angela's rejection cut deep, but her willingness to consider his offer, however slight, was a lifeline. He knew the road ahead would be a battlefield littered with mistrust and old scars, but he was determined to fight for redemption, not just for Angela, but for the man he wanted to become. The night wasn't over, and neither was his journey. The rain had stopped by the time Michael drove away from Angela's apartment, but the storm inside him raged on. Sitting in his car, the silence broken only by the occasional drip of water from the roof. He replayed every word, every raw emotion from the confrontation: Angela's pain, Jacob's fury, Ethan's quiet hope. It all weighed on him like a physical burden. For years, he'd seen Luciano's Bistro as his kingdom, a monument to his hard work and vision. But now he saw the cracks in that illusion, the unseen costs of his ambition. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he also knew he had a chance, however slim, to rebuild what he'd broken. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt a fire ignite within him, not of pride, but of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing a mistake. It was about rediscovering the soul of his restaurant and proving that second chances were possible. Determined to follow through on his promises, Michael spent the next few days laying the groundwork for change. He reached out to food critics, local media, and even old industry contacts, sharing a story he'd never told before: the untold contributions of Angela Carter to Luciano's Bistro. He admitted publicly that many of the restaurant's iconic dishes bore her creative genius, a truth he'd failed to acknowledge in the rush of early success. He also finalized plans for the legacy night he'd proposed, a grand event at Luciano's Bistro to honor Angela and other forgotten heroes who had shaped the restaurant's history. But he knew none of this would matter if Angela didn't believe in his sincerity. Every night, as he stared at the ceiling of his upscale loft, doubt crept in. What if she never came around? What if his efforts were too little, too late? 2 weeks after their tense encounter, Angela finally responded to his repeated respectful messages. She agreed to meet at Luciano's Bistro, though her tone, curt and guarded, made it clear she wasn't ready to forgive. When she stepped through the doors for the first time in over a decade, the air seemed to shift. The staff, briefed by Michael on her significance, watched with quiet reverence as she walked in, her posture rigid, but her eyes scanning every familiar corner of the space. Michael met her near the entrance, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. "Thank you for coming, Angela," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. She nodded stiffly, her gaze cold. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But Jacob and Ethan, they kept pushing me to at least see what you have to say. So say it. What do you want from me?" Michael took a deep breath, knowing this moment could make or break everything. "I want to make things right, Angela. I know I can't undo the past, but I can give you what you deserved back then. I'm offering you the role of co-head chef at Luciano's Bistro, full creative control, a salary that reflects your talent, and a public acknowledgement of every contribution you made. You've already started telling your story to the press, giving credit where it's due. And Legacy Night, it's happening next month, a night to celebrate you and others who built this place with me. I don't expect you to trust me yet, but I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed." Angela's expression remained unreadable as she listened, her fingers tightening around the strap of her worn bag. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, laced with pain. "Do you know how hard it was to walk in here again, Michael? Every corner of this place reminds me of dreams I had, dreams I thought I'd buried. And now you're offering me this lifeline. But how do I know it's not just a publicity stunt? How do I know you won't push me aside again when the spotlight fades?" Her words cut deep, and Michael felt the weight of her mistrust like a physical blow. "You don't," he admitted honestly. "All I can do is show you day by day that I mean it. If you take this role and feel I'm not holding up my end, you can walk away, no strings attached. You'll even step back from the kitchen entirely, if that's what you need to feel safe. Just let me start rebuilding that trust." For a long, agonizing moment, Angela said nothing, her eyes searching his face for any hint of deception. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I'm not saying yes yet," she clarified, her voice still guarded. "But I'll consider it. I need to talk to my boys first. They've been through enough, and I won't make a decision that hurts them more." Michael exhaled, a flicker of relief breaking through his tension. "That's all I ask, Angela. Take your time, I'll be here." As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back with a look that wasn't quite warmth, but wasn't hostility either. "If you're serious about this, Michael, don't just talk, show me." The weeks that followed were a test of patience and resolve. Angela eventually agreed to return as co-head chef, but the road to collaboration was fraught with tension. Old wounds resurfaced in the kitchen, disagreements over recipes, lingering doubts about motives, and moments where Angela's sharp words reminded Michael just how deep her scars ran. One particularly heated exchange came during a late-night prep session when Angela accused him of undermining her authority in front of the staff over a menu change. "I thought this was supposed to be equal," she snapped, slamming a ladle down on the counter. "Or are you just pretending until the cameras are gone?" Michael swallowed his frustration, taking a step back. "Angela, I didn't mean to overstep. I'm still learning how to share this space. Tell me how you want to handle it, and I'll follow your lead." Her eyes narrowed, but after a tense pause, she nodded, a grudging respect flickering in her gaze. Slowly, through small acts of accountability, a fragile partnership began to form. Together, they crafted a new menu, blending Angela's bold, soulful flavors with Michael's polished techniques, and the restaurant buzzed with a renewed energy that hadn't been there in years. Legacy night arrived like a beacon after a long storm, and it was a spectacle unlike anything Luciano's Bistro had ever seen. The restaurant was transformed with warm golden lighting, vintage photos of its early days adorning the walls and tables, set with care for a sold-out crowd of diners, critics, and community members. Guests murmured with anticipation as they took their seats, eager to witness the stories behind the bistro's legacy. At the heart of the evening stood Angela, dressed in a crisp chef's coat, her nervousness masked by a determined set to her jaw. Michael took the stage first, his voice steady as it carried over the hushed room. "Tonight isn't just about food," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before settling on Angela. "It's about recognizing the people who poured their hearts into this place. Angela Carter is one of those people. Her talent, her vision, and her resilience helped make Luciano's Bistro what it is today. I failed to give her the credit she deserved years ago, and for that, I'm sorry. But tonight, I'm honored to welcome her back as co-head chef and to celebrate her story." The room erupted in applause, a wave of warmth that seemed to catch Angela off guard. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. "I didn't think I'd ever stand here again," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "For a long time, I thought my dreams were stolen from me. Coming back wasn't easy, and I'm still learning to trust again. But tonight, I feel seen. Thank you, Michael, for giving me this chance. And thank you to my boys, Jacob and Ethan, for reminding me to keep fighting." She gestured to her sons seated near the front, their faces glowing with pride. Jacob, who had once shoved Michael in anger, now offered a small, genuine smile, while Ethan wiped a tear from Kim's cheek. But Legacy Night wasn't just Angela's moment, it was a tribute to everyone who had been overlooked. Michael had spent weeks tracking down former employees whose contributions had shaped the bistro's early years. One such person was Leroy Jackson, a line cook who had worked grueling shifts during the restaurant's first chaotic months. Leroy had a knack for calming tempers in the kitchen, often diffusing arguments with a quiet joke or a kind word, but his name had never been mentioned in the restaurant's lore. On Legacy Night, Michael invited Leroy, now retired and walking with a cane, to the stage. He presented him with a framed certificate of appreciation and announced a mentorship program in Leroy's name designed to support young cooks from underserved communities. Leroy's weathered face broke into a wide grin as he accepted the honor, his voice cracking as he spoke. "I just cooked the food, man. Never thought anyone noticed. This means the world to me." The crowd cheered, and Michael felt a lump rise in his throat, realizing how much these small gestures mattered. Another story unfolded with Maria Torres, a dishwasher who had scrubbed pots until her hands bled during the bistro's infancy. Maria had once suggested a tweak to a dessert recipe, a hint of cinnamon in a creme brulee that became a customer favorite, yet she had never received credit. Michael brought her forward, sharing her story with the audience, and announced a small scholarship fund in her name for aspiring culinary students facing financial hardship. Maria, now in her 60s, clutched the framed acknowledgement to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was invisible," she whispered to Michael later, her voice trembling. "Thank you for remembering me." As the night unfolded, filled with laughter, tears, and shared stories over plates of Angela's reimagined dishes, Michael stepped back to watch it all unfold. Luciano's Bistro wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a living tapestry of human connection, woven from the struggles and triumphs of every person who had ever walked through its doors. Angela, Jacob, and Ethan sat together at a corner table, their laughter ringing out as they sampled a new dessert, and Michael felt a warmth he hadn't known. In years, Jacob caught his eye and gave a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. The boy who had once threatened him now saw him as something more than a villain. In the quiet moments after the event, as the last guests departed and the staff began cleaning up, Angela approached Michael near the kitchen. Her expression was softer than he'd ever seen, though traces of caution lingered. "Tonight was more than I expected," she said quietly. "I'm not ready to say I forgive you completely, Michael. That takes time, but I see you're trying, and that counts for something." Michael nodded, a weight lifting off his shoulders. "He'll keep trying, Angela, as long as it takes." She offered a small, tentative smile, the first he'd seen from her, and in that moment he knew they were on the path to something new, even if it was fragile. Michael's journey taught him a truth he'd ignored for too long. Success built on others' pain is hollow. He learned that redemption isn't a destination. It's a process paved with accountability, patience, and genuine effort. Luciano's Bistro became a symbol of second chances, a reminder that it's never too late to right a wrong. And for us, the lesson is clear, whether you're at the top or just starting out. Look around, value the people who lift you up, acknowledge their contributions. And when you stumble, have the courage to make amends. Their stories matter as much as yours. If Michael's transformation moved, you hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales of resilience and redemption. Until next time, keep building bridges, not walls.